Thank you, Candace, and let me give thanks to you folks. See, there's one thing that makes the whole all work, because you people come to listen. Talking to an empty hall would be no good in telling a story of history. It would be no good for any. So, we thank the museum for putting them on. We thank the people for bringing the beer, and that's important. But it is you folks that really makes it worthwhile. And since this is the last of the series, I'd like to thank all of you for being here. And I wore the derby hat tonight because you see the advertisement we have. They say, you're drinking a beer and celebrating, but they have a derby on, but they could get us for false advertising unless somebody, but I'm not of the water punch. Now the topic tonight, it's plural, you see, of women that made a difference. And I have to apologize to you to start with, that I had 4 different women in mind, but I could never get it to work together right, you see. They each were different individuals and had their own stories. So I'm going to deal with just one. Now, all of you know about the Crawfords here at Steamboat. But how many of you know about Lou Smart at Hayden? Lou Smart and the Smart family came to Hayden before the Crawfords came to Steamboat. Hayden is older than Steamboat. And Lou has a tremendous story. Well, Lou, I'll get break back on it. But see, after the Ute Uprising, in September of 1879, they fled to Steamboat, or to Hot Sulphur. On November the 2nd, she started a long letter to her family. She finished it on November the 5th, 1879. In that letter, she told the story of what happened of the summer and through the uprising and what happened to her and her family at Hayden. Now, I need to caution you to start with. That's a time when we're talking about the uprising and the Utes, and a lot of you are going to want me to take off, go down to Meeker and that. So this is her story. It's her event. It's what happened with the lady there. And so you're going to miss out on part of that, but it's a tremendous story. I suggest that I can't cover all of it, but get out the book that was published, Hayden and the History of West Routt County. And look at from page 2, and you will find the copy of her letter in its original, other than the type, in the original form. That is, the misspellings and so on that were there. But Lou herself is a very interesting person. You will see copies of her handwriting. She has a very strong and capable handwriting. And I'm going to skip back now just a little so we put her into a perspective in time and talk just a little bit about the Utes, the railroads, and some things that put her in Hayden and put her in the circumstances that she was there. All right, to begin with, let's start with Ouray, Chief Ouray. Now, Chief Ouray, the Utes and the Ute Reservation and what happened there is a whole different story. You hear this about the settlers coming in, the miners coming in, and all of those things that happen. They don't apply to the Utes. The Utes are unique. They're unique because of Ouray. Ouray was raised down in New Mexico. Some claim his first language was Spanish. I'm not sure it was his first language, but it was very early, and he preferred to speak in Spanish rather than the Ute. I mean, this was his native thing. He had been raised around house. He knew what happened after the Mexican War, what happened to the Indians in New Mexico, the power of the army, and he was forward thinking, way forward thinking. So he wanted to protect the Utes and the Ute Nation. Now, at the same time, we talk about the gold rush and everybody coming in. Well, there was a bigger rush going on and a more powerful rush going on. That was building railroads. That was where the money was at for big money people. So when Ray started in 1863, he will go to Denver and meet with Governor Evans, John Evans, who was a railroad man who had made Evans in Indiana is named after him. He was on the board of directors of the Union Pacific. He was involved in a lot of railroads. He is a railroad man. And that in 1861, right after the gold rush, excuse me, he started looking for a route directly west from Denver to Salt Lake City. William Green, who was a Pony Express man, who was in the stagecoach business, he pays people to find a pass directly west so they can connect Kansas City, which is now beginning to be a boom town and a new town, with Salt Lake City, as opposed to being Omaha going across or being Memphis going across. Well, they found the pass. They hired Berthoud, Lieutenant Edward Berthoud, and they surveyed a railroad and stagecoach route over Berthoud Pass, through the Grand County, over Gore Pass, through the Routt County, what became Routt County. They found coal. Now, if you're going to build a railroad, you need to have coal for power, and they found coal on the ridge just west of Oak Creek. They found it again in 20 Mile Park, and they found it just outside of Meeker. And they came back and reported this is a route that is acceptable for a stagecoach and a railroad. When Evans comes in as governor, he goes up on top of Berthoud Pass, and he said, this is where the great mechanic has picked a route for us to build. So the one thing they wanted to build was a railroad across through would be Grand County, Routt County, Moffat County, where US 40 goes today, essentially. That's where they were planning on building their railroad. Now, Ray is going to move the Utes to a safe area. So he will, away from where the railroad would be, and west of where the mines are going to be. That is, so it is not in where Leadville's at and all of that mining zone. Now they started and tried to have a treaty, 1863, and because of Indian wars and other things, that one fails. They tried again in 66, and it failed. All right, in 1868, Governor Hunt, who was the governor then, and Ray and the Indians signed a treaty. Now the treaty, and you need to have the boundary line of it, get it in mind. It was the 107th meridian to a point 15 miles north of the 40th parallel. Then it turned west to the Utah line, then south to the New Mexico line, and then back. Now, if you take a look at the map, a silhouette map of Routt County and Moffat County, there's a panhandle sets down at the southern end of Routt County. That's setting on the Ute Reservation. Routt County, Moffat County was outside the reservation. Rio Blanco County, Garfield County was inside. Eagle County is outside. So the boundary lines were where they're at. So now, that area is then when the railroad is going to be going through, the Utes would be south of it and be separated from. That was the original plan. Now, they started with the railroads, and to give you just an idea, and we'll run real quick with it, in order the profits that were made. The Union Pacific gets completed, the Kansas Pacific, they get it into Denver, but there's not a connection up to the Union Pacific. They can't come west yet because they haven't gone over Berthoud Pass or South Boulder Pass. So they put in the Denver Pacific. 103 miles of the Denver Pacific Railroad. They had Arapahoe County gave $250,000 or $500,000 bond issue, which they didn't plan to pay. They no, because they're going to have it all paid off for them. Then they put that money into a Denver bank. The Denver bank then took that $500,000 and turned it into $2 million. The federal government now is going to give them, for building a railroad, 1 million acres, $32,000 per mile, plus all of the stone, timber, and everything for free. To build the railroad, the Denver Pacific, it cost about $2 million. The investors made about $6 million. So you can see why they would want to build a railroad on west. Now give and take many other things. 1872, Devin Moffett, John Evans, some of the people in Kansas, and so on, organized the Denver, Denver, Georgetown, and Utah Railway. Now by this time, Hayden had gone through and surveyed and found the coal field and found the oil seeps that were out at Toll Creek, found out the gold and silver up at Hans Peak, and they reported. So they're going to build a railroad. Now, getting back to Lou Smart. Lou Smart, she was born in England. Her parents, Robinsons, were prominent people, not exceptionally wealthy, but her dad was, Charles, was a mining engineer and also a geologist. He will come to the United States. She came also and she marries. And then at the end of the Civil War, divorced because things were not working out with the Swanberg. And she came to Golden and met Albert Smart. Now the Smart family, Porter Smart, had been involved from the very beginning in trying to get a railroad across to where US 40 now goes, the Berthoud Survey. Is they have the Union Pacific, the Kansas Pacific, and the Burlington. They're all thinking about railroads coming through this route. Excuse me again. Well, then Lou Smart marries Albert Smart, and in 1874, Porter Smart organized the Western Colorado Improvement Company, and they are going to settle at Hayden. 12 wagon loads of people start for Hayden. One of them is Lou and her husband. Lou was pregnant at the time. Now stop and think about it. They're going out to where there's not any building, there's not any community, there's nobody living within 150 miles of you, and she's going to have a baby. Yeah, you know, that takes, and this gal is well educated. See, she's not, she can write, she reads, she's a pretty smart gal. This is a whole different world for her. But yet they will come to Hayden, and Albert built a cabin, and that's it. All the rest of them went back. She stopped there. She is there. 1874. They reorganized 1875 into the Bear River what they call it, Colonization and Improvement Company, and now they get through some methods. Get the Peter Shirt in Chicago is going to bring out a whole colony of people, and they are going to settle from across Grand County, Routt County, though those not counties yet, and have all these settlements along the Denver, Georgetown, and Utah Railroad. The railroad goes broke. But the church shows up. Now, Crawfords are at Hot Sulphur Springs by this time. But they don't get there until November. They go over Berthoud Pass and part of them freeze out there. Then they try to get over top of Gora Pass. and they get to Hayden. But most of them decide it's time to quit, so they take the White River Trail up to Rawlins and go back to Chicago. But they did build 2 cabins that later will be a problem for us. The Mann cabin and the Johnson cabin. Now Gordy, that is Albert's brother, also builds a cabin. That's Hayden. That is Hayden. The whole thing that's there, you see. She's the only woman. She has 3 children. The son by her first marriage, the child by her, the girl, and then the baby that was born here at Hayden, 1874. First white child, born on the Amper River. Lou Smarts. Then they decide, you see, in order to boom the country and get people coming in and whatever, they're going to create counties. Well, they got signatures out of Georgetown to create Grand County. It was challenged, being saying they were not people from the area that was to be settled. But then there was law ruling made, and Grand County was established, and Boulder got the university, and everybody took care of things. Well, that worked so well, they tried it again in Routt County, and it worked again. 9 people was able to try to be part of the government. The population of Routt County, when it became a county, one person put it down in 2 paragraphs. Not names, or not line, but this guy from there and this guy from there, and 2 paragraphs. 20 people. Other than up at the mine, up at Hans Peak. And they said, well, there's about 20 people there. Hayden is the county seat. Louis Smart's home is the county, that's it. That's all that was there. All right, now, 1879, the year for her letter. Well, let me go back just a little. 1877, James Thompson will establish himself as part of the Routt County as a treasurer and having a home at Hayden. Now, Thompson had been the private secretary for Governor McCook, and McCook was a railroad, and about a crook as you could get. And they had started with, he had started the Ute Reservation. Well, then he put another place for some of the Utes in Denver, and caused a lot of problems with that. But then Thompson, he becomes the first county treasurer. He's supposed to live in Hayden, but he spent the summers there. But he had a wife, Elsa, and 5 children. So when Lou is there, at least during the summer months, 1877, 78, and into 79, there's at least another woman there. Now, it's hard for me to understand this, but you see, from 1875 on, the Crawfords were here in Steamboat, and Lou and Mrs. Crawford did not know each other. They had never met until the uprising. See, that far apart, and the women did not meet with each other. Now, Albert is an energetic man and does a tremendous amount of working all over in order to keep things going. Gordon, who is there and also our first county commissioner, he lives primarily over Grand Lake and looking for gold and taking hunters out, and he's not around most of the time. So Lou has to milk the cows, take care of the chickens, because you understand the income that they have is either by game hunting, that is hauling meat to the mining camps, hides, or selling butter. And since Albert's gone much of the time, it is Lou's responsibility to milk the cows, to skim the cream, to churn the butter, to take care of the milk and the chickens and everything else. Well, now, in June 1879, Thompson, he said the trim at meat rifle, get the right place, Hayden, get to where I'm at, Hayden, and he decides he is going to go to Washington, D.C. and get a job as an Indian agent. Now these aren't just normal frontier people. You see, he's going to go to Washington, D.C. and pull strings. So he heads back to Washington, D.C. Well, he didn't get the Indian agency job because he didn't have religion. But you see, he had to have religion in order to get one at that time, but he got him a government job. So he's gone. Well, Albert, her husband, he's getting some kind of legal problems, and he has to be over hot sulfur. So we got a county in out county, but there's no court here. So he has to be over hot sulfur for the court all summer. Well, Albert just leaves. He had just gone, and Colorado comes in. Now, there are a lot of Utes, and a good many of them are excellent, but Colorado is a big, heavy, sloppy man, and he would come into the house where the women were alone. This was, he was throughout the area, and sit around and demand things and threaten to cut their throat if they didn't leave. And as it was, he was very obnoxious. In fact, they brought the army in to Grand County in order to put him under control. Well, he comes in and he sits down in a chair. Another one comes in and sits down on one of the boys' beds because it's a small place, and the other one lays down on the floor and goes to sleep. And he, and just harassing her. The poor gal, Lou, doesn't know what to do. Finally, she runs, gets them to leave, go out of the house, but before they leave, they take a bunch of matches. They take the matches. Well, Lou, after they get them out, she locks the door, bars the door, and heads over to Thompson's where Els is at. Well, the two ladies watch them as they leave. Now, this is a summer of drought. Had 3 good rains during the summer at Hayden. It is a summer of drought. And the wind is blowing, and they watch the Indians get off and set fires. It was a common thing for the Utes to set fire in order to have grass for their horses. Tonight, when they set the fire, those of you who are familiar with Hayden know in the afternoons, quite often, the wind blows towards the mountains. So when they set the fire, it burned away from where they were settled. But during the night, it turned, and come morning now, it came back at them, right at Hayden, with the 2 ladies there and 8 children. And it's coming right at them. They gather up all the stuff they have in Thompson's house because they think, well, there's a better chance of being safe at Smart's house because they've got all the dirt and everything else around it, and her house is in some logs and trees and what have you. So they spend all day getting everything out. Come about 4 in the afternoon, they're just wore out. And they just sit down and pray. See, what's left to do? The flour sack has been poured open. Well, the wind, as it does, it changed. It started blowing towards the mountain again. Well, this time it's big enough fire it crossed the river and heads up the mountain up, but misses them. But obviously, it scared the living hell out of them. But right after that, Thompson sends a letter to his wife, says, get ready to leave. I'm going to pick you up, and we're going to have to leave right away. I'm coming with 2 wagons. Lou then spends the night, and the next day, cooking meats and cookies and things, because when they go out, Thompsons will go out, they'll go down to what is now Craig and take the wagon, the road up to Rollins, and he'll go out. So she spends the night preparing for him. The next day, Lewis is sick, and she can hardly move. Well, Thompson is very good-hearted. He stays one more day. And she's able to see him go. Well, as she wrote in her letter, she had seen many friends leave in her life and part with them. But never in her life had she been so depressed as she was when she saw them right out of sight. She was the only woman there. 3 children. Her husband was gone. A fire had just been near, destroyed them. There was that summer of 1879, fires all over. They burned up across by, and burned them out up at Hans Peak. A fire over on the Little Snake River burned clear over top of Battle Mountain onto the North Platte. All of these aspen that you see that makes up the county, the vast majority of them are fire scars from the fires that were in 1879. So Lou's living in a place where at night you see all these fires moving. She's living in a place where smoke is all the time, and she's alone. As they're leaving, she sees somebody coming. She thought maybe it was Thompson who had forgotten something, he was coming back. But it's another Ute coming in. Now this one is a friendly one. I don't know his name, but she calls him Old Pete. And Albert had traded a gun and a couple of old crippled up horses and $5 for a pony. Well, this Ute, Old Pete, wanted the pony back for his wife. The gun didn't work. One of the horses was crippled. Well, Albert's gone. What does Lou to say? You know, what could she be? Well, the Indian was friendly enough, but he left. But he comes back the next day. She, you know, for the woman that is there, this is a terrible time. Well, then, shortly after that, some Indians came by. Oh, I forgot to add. When they had the fire that nearly burned them out, Lou wrote a letter to Meeker, and so did Elsa, so there's 2 different letters, to him telling him about the fire and the danger they had. They also wrote to the governor. Well, Meeker sends Chief, I can't remember his correct name, but Douglas, and one of the employees out, and they tell the Utes to come back. Get back on the reservation. So the Utes are coming back onto the reservation. And they're doing what Meeker instructed them to do. And returning there, well, they have to come through, a lot of them are coming through right there at Hayden, which is also, they're all of the talk of war. The governor has talked about war. They've got the 9th Cavalry over there. All these are going by for her, you see. But one of them stops and says her husband is only a day away and he'll be there and she'll be all right. You don't have to be frightened. Hell, you don't. So anyhow, the next day Albert does show up. But he has to cut hay. Well, he starts to dig a well for him. And so Lou goes out to help him. She pulls the ladder out so he can work down there and puts it back in, pulls buckets out for him. Well, she fell. It's very sick. Well, the problem passed. Then she went in and fixed dinner. And then she got very, very sick. She had a miscarriage. She wrote her parents and said it was worse than any of the others I had ever had. So it means she had really been through hell itself. She begged for a chloroform to kill the pain, and Albert wouldn't give her any for fear of what it might do for her, that she might kill herself. So for the next 10 days, she's laying flat because she can't get up. Albert having to take care of her. Well, all these youths were coming by. Well, these two cabins that I talked about before, you see, that the Mann place and the Johnson place, they're abandoned. And according to Uray, in the Ute religion, and I can't speak on this with any authority, an abandoned building was a place where the evil spirits could move into. So they burned them. Now, smarts don't understand this, nor does Thompson understand what they're doing, but they burned them and they set some more fire. Now, what the first fire hadn't burned, they start burning this, and it's right at their cabin. Well, as it was, the mail carrier happened to be there, and Albert happened to be there, and they drive the fire away from the cabins, so they then drive it into the river. And it doesn't have the big blow up as the first one, but it's still a major fire. Well, Major Thompson, excuse me, he writes a letter to the governor, to Meeker, and demands that the people that started this fire, they assume it is two men that somebody can identify, and so they get a warrant out of Georgetown. The sheriff from Hot Sulphur Springs, he gets 4 men and himself, and he heads for the White River Agency to arrest the men. So they come through Hayden, where Lou is at, and then on down to the agency. Lou is scared to death. Well, what happened? You see, if they arrest these two guys, take them, the two Native Americans, and take them to Georgetown, Albert's got to go over there to testify. The family's going to be left at Hayden, and the youth probably won't be gentle. She's afraid of what will happen to her if they're gone. You see, if they arrest them. Well, as it was, the sheriff of Grand County had some brains. And they get down to the White River Agency. The youths refuse to produce two men. They can't identify them. So the sheriff just comes back. In the letter, excuse me, in the letter, Lou is pleased. She's tickled. At this, the fire was bad enough, but she didn't want to be left there alone one more time. This is in August. Well, Albert, he had agreed to cut some hay, 20 ton of hay, for Hook, who lived up on Elk River at that time. He thought he could find it in little patches. Well, now, you understand, when he's cutting this hay, he doesn't have any equipment. It's a sickle, and it's a pitchfork. See, this is biblical type of stuff that he's using. It's not modern stuff at all, but he's a man who's got to make a living somehow, and a man who does the work that's necessary to do it. So he and the Hook go off to cut the hay. Well, during this 2-week period, nothing really happens. It's a quiet time for him. But Pope, General Pope, had stationed the 9th Cavalry, Company D of the 9th Cavalry at Middle Park. They will come through and go down to Windsor, which is where Craig is at now, and turn around and come back. So you have the military patrolling going through the tension of the war. The governor, in his speech in January, had talked about the Utes must be removed. He, in a letter in march talked about how they would divide the land and how the ladies down there, that is Mrs. Meeker and Josephine, would be taken care of, and N.C. Meeker, Nathan C. Meeker isn't there, he's been killed. See, they're already planning on having this battle, and they already figure the Meeker's dead. This was a conspiracy of an altogether different thing to build a railroad through down from Gunnison across, but that's another story another time. But anyhow, Albert goes down to Windsor and talks to the commander with the cavalry and is assured that they would be warned if there is any serious trouble, and he returns home. Well, then the commander down there, he's ordered back to Grand County. Now then we have Thornburg on the march coming down at that time. But they don't know that at Hayden. They don't know what, Meeker didn't know about it either. See, he sent for him, but he didn't know what was going on either. And they're there at the house. On this would be September the 30th. Now the Battle of Mill Creek is in September the 29th. So this is the next morning after they get the message out and so on with it. Albert's out front shoeing a horse. They've got a good team for a change. Reed is standing there with him talking. Two people ride up that were looking for some horses, so there's four men standing there. A man hurries in and he tells them, we've got to leave. The army has been defeated and they're in retreat and have been massacred and on with it. So Albert runs in the house, tells Lou we've got to go. She puts some groceries in the sack. She picks up the clothes, gets all those, sends Charlie down there as her son, down to turn the cattle loose, to put some milk out for the chickens and gets everything ready to go, just quick as they can. And they leave. Now, there's two things that have a sense of humor with, but something about with Lou and tell you about Lou and herself. See, now they're leaving. This is a pretty tense time for her, and she's been a pretty tense time for her all along. Well, now then, she, as they're going, they have a dog, a big dog, and they call him Colonel. Well, he's running out and they're barking and they're chasing because he's having fun and they're going. And in her letter, she talks about what it is to have the dog running, laughing, and going and barking. She can see the humor even during this time of tension. Well, now they get down what they call the old camp, or the first camp. That would be west of town, or west of Hayden. I don't know exactly how far that is. And Albert suddenly stopped. He'd remembered the guns, but he forgot the cartridges. He had to run back and get them. So he goes back and he gets them. Well, now they start up, and a family, that is, the Pike family, had just came in about a week or 10 days before that, and they had settled just about where Mount Harris is, somewhere in that area, and I don't know exactly where. Well, her husband was gone, her dad had gone back to Georgetown, and she's there with 3 children. So they put them in the wagon. Now there's no road through there where Bear River runs and all of that part now, that canyon. So they have to go up the river, literally. I mean, in the river, literally, to get up there. Water comes in sometimes inside the wagon where they're at, and sometimes it's dry, and they get out with a wheel. See, because it's a dry year. The wheel on it, the wood had shrank. The iron tire around the outside of it, so it keeps working off, so they have to stop every swap and pound it on. Well, Lou talks about she's holding her Bertie, the little one, on her lap, and got a gun barrel on her back as she's riding up through, and they're trying to get to Steamboat. Now there must have been some kind of an agreement for people to congregate at Steamboat if this uprising occurred. I don't know how that worked out, and I've never read, but they all head this way. Well, when they finally get to Steamboat, there's no one here. See, Mrs. Crawford and her family had headed up Soda Creek. And the old guy was here. He was hiding somewhere in the weeds. So they get to the place that's supposed to be where everybody comes together. And they're alone for a while. Now, that will change. Quickly, they come out and then they will go up and get Mrs. Crawford and her family and bring it down, and some other ones come in. And they build fortifications in case the Utes come. Well, now, there was a lot of competition, you see, because the railroad and which town would be the better town and so on. So Lou suddenly realizes that Mrs. Crawford is not going to be very friendly about it. So she moves outside, and they camp outside. She does the cooking and everything outside. Now, she writes about there was a letter sent, or message sent, to Gordy at Hot Sulphur Springs. I don't know how somebody got through, but I think just probably Gordy, that is Albert's brother, and some men came in with relief. Crawford, James Crawford, who was also in Denver, he will come in. So now they get together and they go out. They killed a deer on their way out and they get to Hot Sulphur. Most of them, the Crawfords and so on, go on to Denver. But Lou, she has to stay in the Hot Sulphur. Now it's been 10 days from the time they go, so the Army has relieved troops and things at Meeker are safe by that time. Well, then the boys, they find the cabin for her to stay in there at Hot Sulphur. Has 3 rooms, has a nice fireplace. It works fine in the morning, but in the afternoon when the wind changes, it fills the house full of smoke. So this is the place she has to live. Well, now Gordy and Albert, they come back to Hayden to see what they can find and what remains there. Get their cattle if they can. They have a mare or 2 mares and colt and anything else that's there. Lou writes, you see, when she packed everything, in a big hurry, clothes for everybody, she got 1 trunk with her wedding dress. That's all she had. So when they rode out of sight, she took and put on Gordy's underwear and washed her own. You see, the poor gal, she didn't have anything. She didn't have anything at all. Excuse me. Butter, where she was there were a few people around Hot Sulphur, would charge her, butter would charge, or milk, excuse me. Milk would charge 5 cents a pint. Well, she had to have it for the younger children. But when Gordy and Albert got back to Hayden, they found all the butter that she had stored and worked on and what they were going to live on, either stolen or bottles broken or whatever. Their chickens, somebody had taken them inside the house, killed them and plucked them in the house rather than outside even. But they did get their cows and they did get their horses back. So they had that much. It turns very cold during that period, Hot Sulphur. Well, in the letter, Lou writes, can you send us any clothes? Everybody has coals. Can you send us any clothes for the poor little girl? Even a large apron, if that's something to keep her warm. Because it's such a bitter, cold November. She then writes in it, she didn't know what they were going to do. They lost everything. They would have to, the boys would have to kill a wagon load of game, take it to Georgetown to trade for hides in order for them to winter. It was all lost at Hayden. And she says, I guess we'll get through. We always have. She also went on to say, now she's a woman who's about 35 years old. She said she had neuralgia in her eyes so bad, she couldn't check to see what her writing is. But you look at her writing, she has a very good hand. And to check her spelling. And her hair had turned white. Excuse me. My hand's cramping. Anyhow, so she ends her letter, just your faithful daughter, Lou. Any questions, comments, thoughts?
Did she live the rest of her life in Mount Sulphur?
No. I believe they went over to Grand Lake. Now, in 1892, she is presumed that she died and was buried there at Mount Sulphur. But the family that later on checked, they went through the cemetery and did not find a grave marker. It does not mean that the grave is not there. Her husband, Albert, died in 1905 in Mexico. Her Porter Smart died in Massachusetts. But she lived until about 92. There was a gold rush of sort, and the Smart family was a fairly large, important family. They had newspapers over in North Park, and they had strong ties around Grand Lake, and things were there. So I think she stayed in Grand Lake. But they never did come back to Haiti. I don't think, once they left. And once they went over and found out what they had, I don't think they ever came back to Haiti. At least there's no record that I know of them coming back. And Thompson, he never came back either. There was a whole different group of people that kept Hayden going and kept it moving. And
Did the kids survive?
The kids, yes. In fact, it was the oldest son, Charles. He had her letter in a trunk, and when he passed away in about in the 1960s, in that period, whatever, they found the letter there then. But all three of the children, of the Smart children, that is Lou's children, survived, so far as I know. In fact, I think because of family connections in the Denver area, they were prominent enough they probably was able to be taken care of very well. Not exceptionally well, but reasonably well. Yes.
How do you find all of your information?
I asked my wife. No. This one, I read a lot of them, but once again, to get the whole letter, not all the background stuff is there. Do look at the history of Hayden and West Grand County, because it's there. Any other questions? You mean I'm going to get off easy? All right. Thank you very much.